As you can imagine, the next thinker is one close to my heart, this young man named David Corbin, who writes a piece, The City of Globalists. Let me give you some background on when I wrote the piece and why I wrote the piece. It was around the year 2013-14, and I was commissioned to write something for younger diplomats, American foreign policy thinkers. Where's the world tending? We found out as we've gone through our study that part of the difficulty after the Cold War is there's no regulating principle to world affairs. This is proven, by the way, in the fact that, well, what do we call the period that we currently live in? We call it the post-Cold War period. And in fact, we might even call it the post-9/11 period. Well, it's not quite original, right? If you call something post something else, it doesn't have its own definition. So I was tasked to try to figure out what will be the defining principle of world affairs in the 21st century. And a lot of what I did in trying to think through the essay is taking up these essays that I've covered and discussed throughout this part of the course. Who are we as human beings? What are the way that we understand ourselves? How do we understand justice and the like? And what I found was that most Western elites, and here not just simply elites in the United States, but elites throughout the world, most of them clung to this notion that Fukayama forwards of an end of history consensus, an end of history synthesis, whereby in the moral or ideational realm, we let people disagree because we can't determine what is true. And in the material realm, we do our best to, as much as possible, encourage economic well-being through globalization, through free markets, and through capitalism. Now, that's the consensus that most elites would like to be the defining feature of the 21st century world. But what do we find out quickly after moving into the 21st century? What do we find out, for example, in 9/11? We find out that that consensus is a consensus that's held by many elites and quite a few Americans and quite a few Europeans, but it's not held by all parties in this world. There is, to reference a great piece called The Clash of Civilizations, there is still difference that defines world history. Human beings are not going to all be able to get on the same page. Right? Even within countries, we think about things differently. Even within families, we think about things differently. Differentiation is part of who we are as human beings. We are not automatons. However, there has been an attempt to place upon us a constraint where we are made more alike, where we are made to resemble one another. And here I'd reference a thinker that's influenced my thought to a great degree, a French thinker named Pierre Manent. And he suggests after 9/11 that something very interesting happens. Two types or two aspirations towards a universal homogeneous society appear, what he calls the Twin Towers of Babel. On the one hand, you have the American attempt to spread freedom and democracy throughout the world, right? This war on terrorism. On the other hand, you have this European multicultural approach to broaden the umbrella of bureaucracy and to place us under one political union. Both of these ambitious attempts, in their own way, are trying to push forward this Fukayama consensus. And even within the United States, you have a political divide between those who are more of a European humor, more of a multicultural humor, here best identified in President Obama, and those who are in more of a unilateral or individualist American humor, best represented in the election of Donald Trump. There's something problematic about both of these types. What's the problem with a hyper-individualistic accounting of human affairs or a hyper-multiculturalist accounting of human affairs? Well, I think the problem is three or fourfold. Number one, it's not cosmopolitan. To believe that everyone can be alike, everyone can be a replicant of one another is not good. But on the other hand, to believe that we don't share some common human experience is likewise not good. The political problem with having these ways of thinking is that we fail to see political reality for what it is because we want to view it through a hyper-individualistic lens or a globalist lens. The theological problem with both of these accounts is what? We take our political commitments in this world and we supplant our commitments to the next. But I think the greatest problem with these two ways, these two distortions of the human experience, is it prevents us from wanting to allow others to be active in making a choice in how we want to live. Think of some of the globalist premise that you ought not to be able to decide how you live in your backyard. There ought to be global norms that are ascribed to everyone. Your choice is being taken away from you. So this is a great, great danger, I argue, at the end of society. And in order to move forward, we need to allow human beings to be active participants. A city of globalists is not a city that we should want to live in.